2020 Iranian attack on U.S. forces in Iraq. On 8 January 2020, in a military operation code-named Operation Martyr Soleimani, Persian. 9 Grov 4 Gi Grov 3 DFE, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) launched 22 ballistic missiles at the al-Asad Air Base in Anbar Governorate, western Iraq, as well as another airbase in Erbil, Iraqi Kurdistan, in response to the assassination of Major General Qasem Soleimani by United States forces. Iran had informed the Iraqi government before the attack, and the information was passed to the U.S. military, signaling that the attack was intended to be largely symbolic. No Iraqi or American casualties were reported. A previous retaliatory attack also took place on 4 January, when rockets and mortars struck the Balad Air Base and the Green Zone. Background: in the lead-up to the attacks, Iranian officials had stated that Iran would retaliate against U.S. forces for the killing of General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad on 3 January 2020. Reportedly, following the Baghdad strike, U.S. spy agencies detected that Iran's ballistic missile regiments were at a heightened readiness, but it was unclear at the time if they were defensive measures or an indication of a future attack on U.S. forces. U.S. President Donald Trump warned Tehran that any retaliation would result in the U.S. targeting 52 significant Iranian sites, including cultural sites. On 3 December 2019, 5 rockets had landed on the al-Asad Air Base, and there were no injuries. A security source inside al-Asad Air Base and a local official at a nearby town said that the reports that the al-Asad Air Base were under attack at that time were false. These reports on Twitter temporarily caused a rally of U.S. and Brent crude oil futures. On 4 January 2020, 2 rockets hit the Balad Air Base located near Baghdad. 2 mortars also hit Baghdad's Green Zone. The attacks resulted in no casualties or damage. According to Iraqi Prime Minister (PM) Adel Abdul Mahdi's spokesperson, on 8 January, shortly after midnight, the PM had received a message from Iran indicating that the response to the killing of General Soleimani had started or was about to start. Iran also informed the PM that only those locations where the U.S. troops are stationed would be targeted. Although the exact locations of the bases were not disclosed, U.S. officials confirmed their troops had adequate warning to shelter from the attack. Attacks. According to the Iranian Students' News Agency, ISNA, the country's state-run news outlet, Iran fired tens of ground-to-ground missiles at the base and claimed responsibility for the attacks. ISNA stated that the code used to launch the missiles was Ozara. The attacks unfolded in 2 waves, each about an hour apart. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, claimed responsibility for the attack and announced that it was carried out in response to the killing of Soleimani. The IRGC added that if the United States responded with a retaliatory strike, the IRGC would respond in kind. The IRGC further declared that their statement was intended as a warning and applied to all of the United States partners who provided their bases to its military. Although the Pentagon disputes the number launched, it is confirmed that both the al-Asad and the Erbil air bases in Iraq were hit. A U.S. military spokesman for United States Central Command stated a total of 15 missiles were fired. 10 hit the al-Asad Air Base, 1 hit the Erbil base, and 4 missiles failed. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper later said that 16 short-range ballistic missiles had been launched from 3 locations within Iran, of which 11 missiles hit the al-Asad Air Base, 1 missile hit the base near Erbil, and 4 missiles failed to reach their target. Other sources confirmed that 2 ballistic missiles targeted Erbil. 1 hit Erbil International Airport and did not explode, the other landed about 20 miles west of Erbil. According to the Iraqi military, 22 ballistic missiles were fired between 1:45 a.m. and 2:15 a.m., 17 toward al-Asad base and 5 at Erbil. According to the Military Times, an American commando said the al-Asad air base was hit hard. Fars news agency released video of what it claims is the attack on U.S. military forces in Iraq. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif stated Iran symbolically targeted the bases which launched the attacks, while a spokesman for Iran's Revolutionary Guard said the timing of the strikes came at roughly the same time that Soleimani died. The U.S. military initially assessed that there were no U.S. casualties, and President Trump later confirmed that. Senior Iraqi officials said that there were neither American nor Iraqi casualties. Among the coalition forces present on the 2 bases, Australia, Canada, Denmark, Finland, Lithuania, Norway, and Poland confirmed that their personnel were unharmed. Iranian television claimed that there were 80 U.S. deaths, as well as damage to U.S. helicopters and military equipment. Satellite photos made by Planet Labs show extensive damage to the al-Asad Air Base. At least 5 structures were damaged in the attack, which apparently was precise enough to hit individual buildings. David Schmerler, an analyst with the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey, which evaluated the photos, said that the attack seemed to have hit buildings that store aircraft, while buildings used for housing staff were not hit. U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper said the damage was limited to tentage, taxiways, the parking lot, damaged helicopter, things like that, nothing I would describe as major. President Trump announced that the damage was minimal. OPEC Secretary General Mohammed Barkindo on conference in Abu Dhabi announced that Iraqi oil facilities were secure. It is believed that Iran deliberately avoided casualties in their operation, while still sending a strong message of resolve in the aftermath of Soleimani's killing by U.S. forces. Pentagon officials said they believed the missiles were designed to kill Americans. General Mark Milley believed that the missiles were intended to cause structural damage, to destroy vehicles, equipment, and aircraft, and to kill personnel, adding that defensive measures by the U.S. troops and early warning systems had prevented American troops from being killed. The Iranian aerospace commander Amir Ali Hajizadeh said the intention was not to kill any U.S. troops. Aftermath. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration issued a notice to airmen, NOTAM, prohibiting U.S. civil aviation operators from operating in the airspace over Iraq, Iran, and the waters of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Singapore Airlines diverted its air flights from Iran airspace following the attacks. On the evening of 8 January 2020, Reuters reported that 3 Katyusha rockets were launched, hitting Baghdad's green zone. Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752 crash. Main article. Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752. Hours following the initial ballistic missile attacks on Iraq, and after the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration announced the NOTAM for the region, a Boeing 737-800 crashed shortly after takeoff from Tehran Imam Khomeini International Airport, killing all 176 passengers on board, including 82 Iranian citizens. Iranian officials said the plane crashed due to technical failures unrelated to the missile attacks. However, they drew skepticism when they refused to allow Boeing or U.S. aviation officials access to the black boxes. A report by ISMarket, a London-based global information firm, suggested the plane was shot down by an SA-15 Gauntlet surface-to-air missile, SAM, after photographs emerged online purportedly showing missile debris in a nearby garden. U.S. President Donald Trump commented that he found the crash suspicious and that somebody could have made a mistake on the other side. American magazine Newsweek cited 2 U.S. intelligence officials as saying that the plane was likely accidentally shot down by an Iranian SAM, mistaking it for U.S. military aircraft. Reactions. On 8 January 2020, Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, said that military actions are not enough and that the corruptive presence of the United States in the Middle East must be ended. Khamenei also described the airstrikes as a slap in the face to the United States. After the attack, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif stated on Twitter that Iran took and concluded proportionate measures in self-defense under Article 51 of UN Charter targeting base, from which cowardly armed attack against our citizens and senior officials were launched. We do not seek escalation or war, but will defend ourselves against any aggression. U.S. response. In his first public comments on the attack, President Trump tweeted, "All is well." He added that damage assessments were ongoing and that he would make a statement on the attack the following morning. In his televised White House statement, while being flanked by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Trump sought to ultimately reduce tensions by downplaying the impact of the airstrikes, observing that Iran appeared to be standing down and ruling out a direct military response. Furthermore, Trump said he was willing to embrace peace and urged greater international cooperation in the region, suggesting that it is possible for Iran and the U.S. to fight against a common enemy, such as the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. However, there were no suggestions that his administration's maximum pressure campaign would relent, with him nevertheless announcing new sanctions on Iran and affirming his stance that they would never be allowed to possess nuclear weapons while he was in office. Both Democratic and Republican members of the U.S. Senate advised the Trump administration to de-escalate its stance with Iran. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said, "I believe the president wants to avoid conflict or needless loss of life, but he's rightly prepared to protect American lives and interests, and I hope Iran's leaders do not miscalculate by questioning our collective will in launching further attacks." In a letter to the United Nations, the U.S. wrote that it is braced to take further necessary action in the Middle East to ensure safety of U.S. personnel and it is also ready to engage in serious negotiations with Iran without preconditions to avert war. Global reactions. European Union leaders urged Trump, both in public and in private, to not give a military response to the attacks. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson denounced the missile attacks on US forces, urging Iran to avoid further reckless and dangerous strikes. Shortly after Trump's announcement regarding the 8 January attack, influential cleric Muqtada al-Sadr urged his followers to not conduct any attacks against US elements in Iraq. Saudi Arabia's Deputy Defense Minister Prince Khalid bin Salman stated that the kingdom would stand with Iraq and do everything in its power to spare it from the danger of war and conflict between external parties. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said during the inauguration of the Turkstream gas pipeline alongside Russian President Putin that no one has the right to throw the whole region, especially Iraq, into a new ring of fire for the sake of their own interests. He added that the tension between our ally USA and our neighbor Iran has reached a point that we do not desire at all, while promoting Turkey's diplomatic efforts to defuse the crisis.